So good morning, everyone. I am Olga Peña, and I'm a biomedical scientist, and I am a volunteer for the Canadian Science Policy Conference, and I'm here to interview today Dr. Pavel Kabat. Good morning, Dr. Kabat. It's a pleasure to have you here. Dr. Kabat is the Director General and Chief Executive Officer of the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis. So, Dr. Kabat, IASA, for what I understand, is bringing a lot of thinkers and politicians together. So can you tell us a bit more about the history of how this was created?
Good morning, and thank you for having me here. IASA, which is the abbreviation of a very long name, is indeed a product of the Cold War, but also a product of great leadership, great vision, and great courage. It was in the 60s where the ships from the former Soviet Union were moving to Cuban waters. It was a time where two great leaders, Mr. Khrushchev from the former Soviet Union and Mr. Kennedy from the United States, were facing big challenge, how to respond to the threat. They've chosen not to respond in a military way, and they've responded in a way of starting a dialogue. That dialogue was picked up by next US President Lyndon Johnson, who approached the former Soviet Union, Prime Minister Kosygin, for a dialogue. They met in 1967 in Glasgow, and among other things in terms of bridging, they agreed about putting together the best scientists from both sides of the wall. It was a real wall in Berlin at that time. And the way how they put it, it's still very well documented in the archives of the White House and Kremlin. Best scientists to come together, to look into the problems which are too big and too complex for one single discipline of science, one single institution, one single country, even one single political bloc. This is how IASA was founded, as an independent international institute where 12 founding member countries, which was United States, still the largest member of IASA, USSR, Japan, and the remaining 9 came half from the former East, from the West, came together to work on the problems which are of interest for both parts of the world. Things like future of the energy, future of the food security, international economy development beyond the current economic model. So this is how we started in 1972, founded at the Royal Society in London by signing a IASA charter by 12 founding member countries.
Very great story. I think a good example to follow for many other institutions in the world. So I understand that one of the issues that you approach is environmental issues or climate change. And I understand that IASA's work provided results that were central to the Paris climate negotiations. So can you tell us a bit more about this or comment on this?
But you know, our paradigm, the fundamental principle is to look into the questions and issues from the holistic, integrated system point of view. So we never look only at climate as such. IASA was the first institution in the world which produced so-called integrated assessment, which is currently the tool to move ahead with most of these sustainable development transitions. So in that tradition, where we developed in 70s, 80s already first energy model of the world, for example, we have developed the first food security model where the former China and former USSR empire data came together with Western data. We always look into the whole spectrum of the biological, physical, political, economic aspects of the problem. So climate is the same thing. Climate, of course, has started, and by the way, I should have said that the climate negotiation started at IASA. It was at IASA where a number of experts met in the 70s. First articulated the need to have a CO2 energy policies and the climate together. From IASA, the experts went to a place called Villach in Austria, where the first idea behind UNFCCC, IPCC was born. So we are connected to that. We have been since then contributing to the IPCC discourse in a great way. For example, IASA developed the so-called emission data for 2000 about the global emissions. We are currently hosting also the database for the last IPCC report. But coming back to my story, we see climate as a part of the cross-sectoral system issue. Climate is not a sector. Climate is part of all the other sectors. Climate is part of the energy discussion. It is part of the adaptation. So we are positioning our climate contribution both in the vertical sense, meaning doing calculations to support the Paris Agreement. For example, we have done recently calculations about the feasibility of 1.5 degree, which went straight to negotiations. We have been supporting a number of member countries for their contribution to so-called commitment, which came from Paris. But we also see climate as a clear horizontal issue. Let me give you an example. In 2006, former Secretary General Ban Ki-moon of the United Nations requested EASA to come to a question of a yet another most integrative assessment of the energy futures of the world in 2006. He asked us 3 questions. Can EASA, supported by its global network of more than 3,000 colleagues,
Wow.
this is core staff in Vienna, which is about 450, can EASA put together an integrated study about 3 questions? Is it possible in 2030 to have the full access to the energy across the world? Currently 2.2 billion people, I'm repeating, 2.2 billion people still don't have access to the modern energy, electricity. At the same time, can EASA calculate if we can double the rate of efficiency of the energy systems? At the same time, can we double by 2030 the rate of renewables in energy mixes? Clear sectoral questions.
Wow.
Before we started to negotiate. We said, Secretary General, can we suggest to look at energy and climate together? Because 85% of the emission target mitigation is energy. So we said we will do all these studies about energy questions, but let us do it within the agreement of 2-degree maximum warming. So we did it for 2 sectors. And in the end, we calculated the big core benefit of pursuing these 2 policies together, which we are not yet doing. In my home country, Netherlands, I'm from Netherlands, by the way, in host country, Austria, here in Canada, we have still sectoral policies. Yet, if we would combine the mitigation target policies, which every country signed for, together with the energy policies, we could save globally somewhere between 600 and 800 billion annually on the cost.
Wow.
So this is the system thinking. This is the way how we are supporting not only the climate convention, but also the whole agreement about development goals, which was agreed in 2015 in New York. We are doing studies in the complex integrated space across all those goals, including climate and energy, water, demography.
What I understand is that EASA has 24 member countries at the moment.
Right.
So if a new country wants to join EASA, how is this process and how that goes?
So we are not a EU organization. We are an international organization of a special kind. We are independent, but very much linked to the governments of the member countries.
Okay.
Our policy is to look into the global representation of countries in our portfolio, because we are supposed to understand and to support by solid science global transformations with the regional and local relevance. So you will find on our membership the largest economies of the world. You will find all the BRICS, which is China, India, Russia and South Africa. You also will find fastly transforming countries like Vietnam, like Malaysia. You will find the largest Muslim country of the world, which is Indonesia, but also Mexico and Brazil. Most recently, we welcomed Iran, which is a very important, and we will be welcoming within the next 2 weeks Israel. But you see that we have still this function to use science to bridge, to collaborate despite of the geopolitical divide. We have Pakistan and India. So what kind of criteria we have for the new membership? We are now 24 and we were 18 just 5 years ago. We grew a lot. A country should be representing a setting within the global landscape of the geo-economic, geo-academic, which is unique, which is representative of particular region, particular setting of developed, less developed economies, geopolitical hotspot of the system Earth. Then. Secondly, the country must be willing and able to connect to the best academic network of the world, because this is what we are representing, preparing. Country should be willing to set up a national structure in which EASA would be relevant and beneficial to the many academic research, but also governmental organizations. And of course, country must be able to pay the annual dues to EASA, EASA governance. In this context, we have finished more or less our representation in Asia. We are very strong in Asia. We are reasonably strong in Europe. We are reasonably strong in Americas. I will come to it in a minute. We are working on Africa and Middle East. Canada was the founding member. Canada was one of the 12 founding members of EASA. And Canada, unfortunately, left us in 1997 for the financial reasons, because at that time the austerity in the budgeting led to the leaving our organization. We were trying for years to convince Canada to join us again. I am very pleased that last year or 1.5 years we have been discussing with different levels of Canadian government about that possibility. I met Honourable Minister Duncan last June here, and there is a lot of symbolic to that, because The Prime Minister of Canada, who decided about joining EASA in 1972, was Mr. Trudeau. And the Prime Minister of current Canada is Mr. Trudeau, his son,
who is coming back now.
with his great vision and leadership. So we really do hope that Canada will join us as well, for many reasons. It is a size of the country which has an ambition and capacity to play a global role. This is the type of EASA member we are very much looking for. We don't have many of those. We need a country which will join us hopefully soon, which will be helping us to balance the geopolitical North American portfolio as well, for the reasons which we'll understand. The geopolitical divides are often here then. We believe that there is a benefit to both, to come together again. I'm going to discuss here in these days as well. And I would be very happy to come back next year, able to say Canada is our 26th or 27th member.
I really hope so too. That's hopefully, let's cross our fingers that happens. So you're also a co-founder of the ALBAC Luxembourg group. Right. So can you tell us more about your work in this organization? At
EASA we do different things. We do, of course, research. And our research is based on, I call it sometimes, two legs. It must be a cutting-edge academic research. There is no compromise. When you do science policy, you have to start with a top-level research. At the same time, our research must be relevant to the policy-making process, mainly in the public sector, but also private sector. We are working, for example, with the World Business Council of Sustainable Development as well. Now, the classical science policy interface model is based usually on top academic publications and then hopes that these publications will be noticed and taken up by the policy sector. I don't believe in that. I believe that science policy interface is a way to engage on both sides, to engage and to understand each other. I also believe that this message of partnership across different academic sectors, between academia and policy and private sector, and NGOs and civil society, needs some more momentum. We are still working in too much silence. Let me give you an example. I am privileged to sit every year in September at the United Nations General Assembly representing EASA in the UN context as a guest. Then I go to Davos, which is the World Business Community, and there are different communities. Then I go to the Youth Global Center, where there is youth like you sitting, talking to each other. Then I go to Greenpeace, which is hosting me for a lecture, sitting with the environmental movement. I don't think this is the way to go. So what we started to do together with my partner, former Commissioner of European Commission, Fischler in Austria, we put together a new generation of the think tank, where the leaders of the academia, global academia, leaders of the global governments, former presidents of the countries, leaders of the global businesses, big banks, financial sector, but also investors, and the NGOs come together every year to discuss major issues of the global transformation. This is the only think tank in the world which does it. We have been hosting, as I mentioned, the presidents of major corporations together with heads of states, with the young academics. And usually we come to an agreement that there is a way to agree, there is a way to collaborate, there is a way to partner up. But it's important to communicate it, important to stand for it. And unfortunately in the practice we are still operating in the silos. So it's still not a system which is moving ahead. The parts are moving ahead. But the parts are not usually fitting into the whole system. We need to understand how they fit together. And this ALBAC Luxembourg group is doing that. We are, as I'm mentioning, every year hosting thinkers. And hopefully this will be one of the mechanisms which will help the world to understand that we need to get connectivity in these particular questions.
Excellent. So just to close this interview, Dr. Kabat, so can you share with us your thoughts about the value of the CSPC?
I think it's a fundamental enterprise, frankly, without thinking too much. I mentioned that science policy is probably one of the interfaces we still don't understand how it should work. Many academics are thinking that the best scientific paper publication will lead them to the policy relevance. This is not true. I think this is, to my knowledge, the only Canadian-led large effort which is happening here. I think it's fascinating how it developed over the last 4 years. EASA would be privileged to partner up for the coming years and help a little bit with our network as well. I think in the Canadian landscape and ecosystem, as far as I understood it as a newcomer here, it's interesting momentum because just recently there is a new chief scientist of Canadian government. I think her position and her task will be to put together academia and the governmental advice. And I think construct which we are now part of here could be very instrumental in this context. So I think it's a visionary step which was made by you here 4 years ago, and I think it's a timely step. So congratulations.
Yes.
Yeah.
So where we can go online to learn more about your work? So just through the IASA's website?
There is so much on the IASA website. We have videos, we have movies, we have of course, and there are a lot of links. We work with the hot links all the way down. I should mention that one of the fascinating things we are doing, it's my own hobby, is combining science and arts.
Oh, wow.
We are working together with the Philharmonic Orchestra in Vienna to communicate this message of sustainability. We have a former dancer of the State Opera preparing a ballet performances about sustainability. Wow. Just last September we had a Carnegie Hall performance during the United Nations Assembly, showing this transformative thinking to communicate. It was about inequality. Yeah. So this is something which can be also found on the IASA website.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.